What's up, YouTube, and welcome back to another episode of Kerbal Space Program 2. First season, of course, first time playing this game, and we are working towards, or waiting for, should I say, the colonization patch. Just getting used to it for now. There is the Lonely Satellite quest complete there, but for some reason I don't think I take it. No, I don't. I forget. But anyway, moon signal is the primary goal here, so we need to get to the moon, or back to the moon. And figure out what the secret is on there. It looks like there's a few of those to follow. You go Moon, Minmus, and then Duna. I'm not sure if there's one on every planet or not. We'll have to wait and see. But for now, we need to jump over to the VAB and get a ship, rocket ship, spaceship, whatever you want to call it, rocket, ready to go. So into the build, just making a few adjustments here. Mainly, I want to make sure that we have the capability to get there and land and get back again. The idea is that we need to land certainly as close as physically possible to the lunar signal, which is some sort of monolith of types. And then, of course, we'll have to physically walk there if it is further away than that, research it, and get the quest done. Reasonably simple, though landing at a specific part on any planet or moon is something that I've always struggled with without aid. And unfortunately, the aid for the trajectory side, and that word is hard to say, of KSP 2 doesn't exist as of yet. It did on KSP 1. Okay, with that iteration of the ship done, I'm going to get that saved just for future reference. You could save them each individual one. I used to, but to be honest, I make so many because I'm so crap at making them. It gets a bit complicated. So I'll usually make one that kind of I use for everything. For now, where there is no cost to anything, it's not a career mode. It doesn't matter. When we go into a career mode, if we ever get there, of course, I will then pay much more attention to the cost of a rocket, because setting up a rocket like the one I'm doing with sort of 8,000 Delta V to the moon is excessive. We all know that. You need, I think, is it 4,500 Delta V for a flight to the moon and back? Not sure if that includes landing though. But anyway, just using up some of the remaining points from our previous missions that we did. 822 science in the bank there. I am being very picky at the minute. My aim is to get to the heavy landing, which you just saw there, which are the medium landing legs for the medium shuttles. Now they're way off. I mean, you're talking 1,500 science away, probably closer to 2,000 science away. There's also prerequisites you need to complete to get it as well. You can't just go straight across. But I think once we start getting these monoliths like the moon, and then obviously the Minmus one afterwards, there's quite a few science points involved there. Also need to finish off science 1 just because of completion, no actual reason. Very unlikely I'm going to use all them girders and things like that, because I don't usually get that complicated. Mainly because building massive space stations where you have to join them together is something that's a bit more complex for me to do. I do it, but again, with aid. Okay, so here we go up into space. I made one adjustment between the last segment from the research completed, and that was I finally unlocked the actual fuel piping, which means that we can do the asparagus build properly. The asparagus build being that the fuel tanks from the outside of the ship drain to the inside, so i.e. on this one, the center. That is that when you then drop the boosters, the outside boosters, the segments within are always full of fuel, and you continue from there. A bit like an onion with multiple layers, but they call it asparagus. So we'll get up now into orbit and see what we like. We'll realize when we get there, and I say we, I already know, that there's a bit of a bug. I'm not sure if it's a known bug or what. I don't really pay attention to the bugs, but there is a bug with the orbit, as you can see. Try to reset that shit and still no line there, and obviously without the line I can't use the node manager and stuff like that. I can't see where it's going to go, so just second launch anyway. We need a couple up there. We've got Minmus to go to, we've got the moon to go to, Both require viewing of the monuments or the special signals, and both require satellites as well. I have updated the mod from the CommLine to the extended CommLine mod. This allows us to have the fancy word that I can't remember, where you can block, where the planets, block the signal. So it makes it a lot more difficult, and you basically need satellites around all your planets, whether they be polar or standard orbit. And specifically geo orbit is important as well. So we'll look at that. I will show it you when we get there, because I do like a whole satellite network setup. It makes me feel more immersed, whereas a few of the other things I make easier because I can't do them. But yeah, so here we are. This time we do in fact have a correct orbit line. Very simple adjustment from our orbit then to encounter the moon on a horizontal orbit here. For the monument where it is on the moon, it is quite it's reasonably close to the equator, so I like to try and match up with a 90-degree orbit on that. Obviously, if the signal was near the pole, I would then go for a polar orbit of sorts to try and come in. Again, you can do it any way you like. Coming into an orbit, you can move from that orbit anyway without too much significance and difficulty. Getting the orbit itself is the first step. You can, of course, if you're pro, go directly into the landing spot without an orbit, but yeah, I don't do that. And again, nicely finishing off an orbit there. So yeah, them green lines you can see currently are the old CommLines system. That is before this is before I've changed it. The ones that I moved to are the blue ones. They are similar, and obviously they do remind you of KSP 1 if you've ever played it. The difference is you can't block the planets, so the signals go straight through planets, and it's too easy. Other than the range, which is highly unlikely to get to without multiple solar systems, there's nothing really. Well, there's no point with this mod, personally, in my opinion, because as you can see, they're going straight through the moon there, and that's not how signals work. When I'm on the opposite side of that moon, I shouldn't have a signal unless we've got either a polar or another one that's much stronger from another angle, like Minmus or something like that. So from here, you can see on the moon itself, that orange speck, that is the signal that we're aiming for. And using the maneuver node controller, which is a mod, but it's doing it the drag and drop thing. Oh, it's awful. So yeah, this is fantastic. It allows you to go backwards and forwards, save, change, do various different things. So what I'm doing now is just raising that orbit up to try and intersect that line. Now that is using normal, because of course normal as a relative term for a planet or a body is around its axes, so vertical, horizontal, etc. You can rotate around it. Prograde and retrograde are the speeds to increase or decrease your speed, and therefore increase or decrease your velocity. Radial is basically hard to explain, and I don't even understand it myself, but basically it rotates the orbit around your physical space. So as you can see, I'm just trying to get this line as close to the signal as possible. To make sure you are in line with the actual planet, I make the both sides of the orbit line up, as you can see. So you can only see one line, but there are the two lines there for the orbit, and then you know you are straight. From there, I then need to come down. Now you've got to take into account that the moon in this case, or the planets in any other case, are always rotating. So if I just put my landing point directly onto that mark as it is and then go for it, we'll miss, because we'll land way behind it, because the planet will then of course, or the moon will then of course rotate away from us. So you need to put the cursor slightly in front. Now honestly, I can't really give any advice on how to do that. I make it up as I go along. Kerbal Space Program 1, I had the trajectory mod that showed it to you, or helped you in the very least. This I kind of guessed, depending on the speed of the moon or the planet's turning, which you can usually do by watching it just a few times, which I did obviously before I did the orbit. You can tell by how fast you go around the planet versus how fast the planet rotates. That gives me an idea. And now I just need to basically retrograde here, slowing the velocity and therefore effectively crashing into the moon. A few tweaks to get it as close as the right line, i.e. the horizon of the mark, but in front of it so that we allow the moon to rotate to us. So once we've got that sort of roughly guesstimated on this occasion, not so well. This was my second or third attempt. Annoyingly, the first attempt, I was 1,500 meters away, or 1.5 kilometers away, which, to be honest, for me is fantastic. This time, a lot further, and we have to walk. Now, I am going to walk simply because it's safer, and I don't have to rely on crashing the ship again, or the lander. But now time for the long walk, or in this case, fly using the monopropellant. As long as I don't get, or you don't get above sort of 35 to 40 meters a second, it seems to not do too much damage to the Kerbal. Above 40, it gives a warning for crashing, so I expect that that will end badly. But we are just arriving there now, so let's view and visit this first monolith of this series. And there it is. It looks like, I'm not sure where the power's coming from to light that thing up. Very fancy. Obviously aliens. I mean, Kerbals are aliens by definition anyway. But anyway, much larger than I was expecting, and much larger than the monoliths in the previous KSP. There you can see we are getting science around the monument as well, both samples and observations, as well as the actual quest itself, which is significant in terms of science as well. Now, we do not have any monopropellant left, or at least very little, looking at that. So don't panic. I am going to return with, well, basically walking however many, 18 kilometers, whatever it was, 15 kilometers, and then flying back. You don't need to see that. It's very simple. Walk back, get in the ship, up to an orbit, or I don't even need to bother with an orbit here. Fly backwards around the planet so that you then go back into the SOI of Kerbin, and then just burn back, retrograde to bring in your encounter back to Kerbin, and then let the heat shield and the parachutes do their magic. And as you can see, that has actually happened while we've been talking, and we have quite a lot of science there to use, so I'm going to go straight into using it. The next step, of course, will be Minmus. So if I can squeeze any new useful items, bigger storage, better solar panels, more science, etc., etc., I shall. And as you can see there is 2 new items for science. Both of them are atmospheric, but there is a mild atmosphere on various different planets that we will use for that, and Kerbin itself needs to be scanned as well. So with that done, and really I unlocked a couple of probe cores and quite a lot of aerodynamic stuff, parachutes, better fins, etc. What I'm going to do now is build a rough concept, simple LSA satellite build, because again, I want to do the satellite thing properly. We need to do it as part of a quest anyway, but also I have the mod installed for the OrbitalSurvey. That is the, like real life satellites really, where you have them it takes a picture of the planet moons, and you have then a visual picture of the entirety of that planet or moon. Of course, doing so, you have to have them in a polar orbit. Just for scanning a sphere, of course, if you have your orientation set like a normal orbit on your 90 degree, whether it be east or west, you will only ever scan the equator and have a picture of the equator. If you put your orbit into a polar orbit, eventually you will scan every part of the planet, because as you're going up and down, the planet itself rotates left or right or both. No, it don't do both, it does one. But anyway, that's the premise of it. So always put your scanning into a polar orbit, otherwise you're not going to get a very good image. The better the polar orbit, i.e. the closer to your 180, 360 degrees of the planet, so up and down, basically, the better. But you can do it on a slight slant if you need to. But I always try and do it like a perfect up and down version. And here we go, launching our first satellite into space on Kerbin, destined for Kerbin. And then from here on, we will then send one out to the moon, to Minmus, to... Basically, the idea is that I'll try and send out some sort of satellite to everybody before I send any Kerbals out there. Not necessarily to do the scan, to make sure that there is an actual relay in that vicinity, so that when we're flying out there we don't lose control. Now, you won't lose control with a pilot in a vessel, of course, but you can lose control or connection or connectivity to your home base, and therefore science and things like that you can't transmit. Now, it's not necessarily tragic, but it's just how I like to play. So here we are once again in a stable orbit around Kerbin. Now, unless there's something significant, i.e. a brand new fancy rocket I've built, I'm going to skip the launches altogether. Better for you, I guess. You don't want to see that over and over again. It's a bit boring. And if you do want to know or see that, let me know. I can always do some form of extra videos to be more in depth. But it's just basically following a profile up to 80 to 85,000 meters, and then retro burning at your apogee to bring that your periapsis to equal it. And there is a simple orbit. For satellites, though, I didn't this time, but moving forward, I am going to probably launch to about 100 to 150,000 meters and have an orbit around there. It's more efficient, I believe. And it's definitely more efficient for pushing out large orbits, because the higher you are in an orbit, the cheaper it is to do anything. That is how it works, the physics of it. And you will notice that if you find that you're struggling to make a change, go to the highest point of that or the opposite point of it and do the change there, and you'll find it's much, much cheaper. And there we go, at 800-ish, just over 800,000 meters there above, you can see the orbital survey is now ideal altitude. Every planet moon has its own. The minimum was 500, ideal in this case is 800. And you can see now on that map of Kerbin, it is slowly going to take a photo of the planet. That pattern you can see is as I said. So as it's flying up and over and around on a vertical polar orbit, the planet then turns underneath it, and eventually over time you will have a full picture of the entire planet with no black spots. That is the satellite done for Kerbin, so we'll leave that to take the pictures. It will also act as a relay, I hope, moving forward, if I put a relay on there. Again, as soon as I've got satellites up, if they don't have the correct relays, then I'll just bin them, because a satellite without a relay is... Well, a satellite without a relay and without an orbital scanner is useless. And here we are again, already in orbit, already ready to make a change on a maneuver that is going to intersect us with Minmus. So we're making our way out to Minmus now. Of course, first time to Minmus is twofold. Satellites required, obviously, and just landing. The quest then for the monument should appear. The Minmus monument is on a polar, or at least it's very close to the North Pole of the moon. So that's a bit more complex. The other complexity to going to Minmus is it is not on the same orientation as Kerbin and the moon. They're both flat. Minmus is a few degrees out, so you need to match that angle in order to make it reasonably easy to then get there. The way I do it, and the simplest way I would suggest you do it, is firstly you come out to orbit within Kerbin, which will be at 90 degrees by standard. Of course east, because it's easier to make an orbit going east because you're using the planet's rotation to help you. Once you've then got a stable orbit, you can then do a match plane at the descending node, and you will then match the planes with the targeted body, which in this case is Minmus. You're then on that orientation, and you can then just do what you normally would, which is fly out, increasing your velocity until you intersect with it. Minmus is atmosphere is non-existent, the gravity is terrible, so it's very easy to move around and do things, but also if you've got a lot of power still in your rocket, which to be honest, the motors that I've got, the rocket engines that I've got on this are a bit too powerful for Minmus, so adjusting is difficult. Turning down the throttle down to about 5% makes it a lot easier to do things. You're talking 10 delta V can make you go from the planet one side to basically missing the planet altogether. So just skipping over now, you can see CommunityResources is popping up. That is a separate entity to what we're doing. I don't know why it's doing that, because as you can see there's clearly a connection without an issue. But what we want is to get to the apogee as always, or the periapsis as always, and then retroburn into an orbit. Again, from the orbit you can then do whatever you like. At least in an orbit you have time to decide, or save and do it another day, of course. And there we go, stable orbit above Minmus, making a save there. I do save, not usually because of making mistakes, because it takes me probably 2, 3, 5 goes, sometimes 1 go, but yeah, to do most things. That's fine. It helps me learn and get used to the controls anyway. I save because usually of bugs or things going missing. I.e., one thing that's common is the orbital lines missing, which means I can't really do much then. Another common thing is if I leave my lander on the planet and then walk too far away from it, it vanishes and then I'm stuck. So that's usually why I do my saves. And coming down now onto Minmus, nice and simple. There's no atmosphere, no friction, no nothing. The solar panels can stay out. That wouldn't actually cause, as long as you don't fall over. They won't get damaged at all, nothing. In fact, Minmus is usually the place that I've always had a colony on, specifically because, again, KSP 1, or just KSP, had a very good amount of ore on Minmus. Whether it will be the case on KSP 2, I don't know. But yeah, and it's also very easy to just manipulate, move around, land, take off. You really don't need much thrust at all. To be honest, your suit with your monopropellant, you can actually get into orbit and probably leave the planet of the moon altogether. Coming in now with a few bits and bobs here and there. You can see suicide burn as always. It's just the easiest way. As long as you've got the power to do so, it shouldn't be a problem. And there we go. Touchdown with a bit of a bounce, but of course chucking north there, that will hold it vertical. The legs broke on me, I'm not sure why. Whether I opened them too soon and the engines damaged them, I'm not sure, but they just don't work anymore. But there you go, he's very happy to be on Minmus. Of course, a few science things to do. Sample, service sample, the most important, or at least the highest in terms of value for science. And plant a flag, because why not? I am liking my art colours, by the way, orange and black. Let me know your thoughts. Back in the old one again. This was something you couldn't do. You couldn't change the colours without mods, and even then it wasn't very good. But yeah. Walking around to try and get a good screenshot here, so I can skip that. And with that sample gathered and any observations and orientations and science and stuff and things that you can do done, just jump back in, launch up. You can see that just very small burst, already 20,000 meters above. And all we need to do that is now burn across to the trajectory to allow us to escape Minmus. We'll instantly be caught by Kerbin and then basically just get away over to Kerbin, land. Doesn't matter where we land, that's the good thing about this game. As long as you land somewhere on Kerbin, it's fine. You recover a vessel and you get all your science and all your giblets. You don't have to land near your actual space station, which would make it a bit more complex. I mean, you could decide to do that, but I'm not going to. And then returning to Kerbin in a ball of fire, or technically plasma. And we have the parachutes ready. Plenty of parachutes here, more than we need. No drag chutes, we don't really need that either. We're not coming in that fast. and then of course they will slow us down to a standstill and hopefully land somewhere. Again, if we land somewhere new, i.e. a biome, we can get a little bit more science from that as well, though I'm not sure how many surface samples you can hold in the shuttle at once. I think it is only one. But it looks like we're landing on the mountains here, which is somewhere new we haven't seen before. Yeah, very nice. Snowy mountain with a few snowy trees. Excellent job. Get that recovered now and the science from that, and we are good to go. See another 821 science gain from there, and also the orbital scan of the planet is almost done. Looking good. Just playing around with a few of the settings, see what options I do have. We are going to end the episode here now, though. We are at time. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and the next one of course will be more monuments on Minmus. So thank you very much for watching. If you like the video, please click like. Any comments are welcome. As always, join us on Discord, subscribe for more. Take care. Goodbye.